Good day to you all. This is Peter Parsons. I'm the Lewisboro Town Supervisor. And I'm here this morning to talk to you about what's been happening during the first 3 months of 2013 and a little bit about the events that are coming up in the next 3 months. My main job, as you know, is to be the town's chief financial officer. So I should start by updating you on the money. 2012 has brought us close to a zero balance for the town. In other words, for the past few years, our checkbook has had red in it on that balance line, and we're getting to the point where instead of having red, we won't have green, but kind of we're in the middle with a zero. That's an improvement. Not great, but it's an improvement. There is a caveat on 2012, though. All the costs and all the reimbursements from the federal government for the Sandy storm are not yet in. So the final figures on 2012 will not be available for another few weeks. 2013, it's going to be yet another tight year in town. Your town employees are stretched. They're doing more than they really can do. We're asking them to do ever more. Try to be patient with them and realize that they're being asked to do more and more within the same amount of time. Okay, this quarter has essentially seen the end of our aid of our Americans with Disabilities Act upgrades. There is one place we've got a couple of things to do and that's the townhouse. If you walk into the or if you come into the townhouse, there is now a small meeting room downstairs where the controller, I, or anybody else can meet privately with anybody in the town who would prefer to not climb the stairs. Within a couple of weeks, we will have a handicap bathroom downstairs, and we will have a new ramp into the townhouse, and that in essence will complete our work on ADA. Obviously, the last quarter, the biggest physical change that people may have noticed is the new police station over in Cross River. That again was motivated by the need to become compliant with the American with Disabilities Act. Drop in and visit Chief Frank Secret. It's a nice building. It should help us enforce the law in the town by bringing the police into the biggest hub of the town, and with the convenience of being next to the high school and the shopping center. Another large issue in this town during the last year and for years to come will be New York City's water supply. Why do we care? Because 2/3 of this town drains into the New York City water supply. And they care greatly, and so do we, truthfully, that New York City remains a healthy place. And that means a first-class water supply. We completed our GIS mapping last year to keep us in compliance with state law. Now, this year, I am hoping to get 3 phosphorus reduction projects underway. Each of them will be funded by New York City, ultimately, one of them via the county, but in the end, it's New York City money. And they together will reduce the phosphorus pollution into our lakes, and ultimately into the city water supply. During the last 3 months, the library has got a full go-ahead from our planning board, as has the project to put a parking lot off 123 for people who want to use the Leon Levy Preserve, whether it be with your car or with a horse trailer or with a school bus. Also, during the last 3 months, we've done a lot of work at the Old Field Preserve. The Old Field Preserve was intended mainly as a meadow preserve. Meadows are important because they allow birds and animals to nest, give birth to their young. They allow a whole lot of life in town, which cannot exist without meadows. So during this winter, we have restored acres worth of meadows up in the Old Field Preserve, which was the original intent of the preserve. And secondly, we've just got a grant with the help of Jim Norgren as a volunteer, who has got us a grant to attack invasive species. 95% of this work at the Old Field Preserve has been done by volunteers to whom we should all be grateful. The other 5 to 10% was done by Randy Price, working for our Parks and Rec department. But essentially, this has been a volunteer project. E-waste. Many of us in our basements, if you're like me, have old fax machines, old TVs, old computers. It just goes on and on, the amount of equipment that we don't really know how to get rid of and we throw in the basement. Beginning on April 13th, the recycling center behind the townhouse will accept e-waste. That's all that technical stuff which is cluttering your basement and for which you have no use whatsoever any longer. Some small things we've done in town. I think there's been some confusion over an amendment that the town board has enacted to the subdivision and wetlands laws. Whenever somebody applies to the planning board for either a wetlands permit or a subdivision, and the planning board consider it sufficiently important to have a public hearing, we have decided that the person who's requesting that hearing put up a sign on their property telling people. Why do we need that? So the neighbors know. We've had too many instances where people have come to us after planning board permission has been granted, saying, but I never knew it was going to happen. Now, the reason for this is that not all of us, in fact, very few of us indeed, read the public notices at the back of the Lewisboro Ledger each week. And that is the main way the town traditionally communicates notices of public hearings. There and via mail to the immediate neighbors. But very often people other than immediate neighbors feel they have got an immediate interest in one of these applications. So for a 10-day period, we're asking the applicant to post a notice on their property. This is common outside this town, and it's something we borrowed from other towns around us. Next, just a reminder to everybody, there is a new town ordinance banning smoking in town parks. we will be enforcing it. Next, there is an ordinance forbidding all use of motor vehicles of any kind inside town preserves and town parks. People using vehicles inside these areas cause the town enormous damage, and it is something I've asked our police to enforce as stringently as possible. We passed a law enabling the Energy Improvement Corporation to offer financing on beneficial terms to businesses in town if they want to improve their energy efficiency. That's good for the environment, but it also keeps this town competitive with our neighbors as a place to set up a business. Grace Church, this is something which is mainly of interest to people in the Vista area. Grace Church has received a permit to go ahead and build right on, in New Canaan, but right on our border. Our power to influence what happens in New Canaan or Connecticut is more than limited. But we've achieved a few concessions. First, no construction equipment will be allowed on West Road. Second, we will have full use of the dry fire hydrant, which is going to be put on the Grace Church property. Third, if any damage is done to Pudding Hill Road during the construction process, the church will have to pay to restore it to its original state. Next subject, our highway department. Our highway department has done a phenomenally good job with this winter. We've had a lot of snow, actually, or a lot of days when we had to prepare for snow. And there was freezing, and there were all kinds of problems on the roads. I think most of us were able to get to work with very little problem indeed, and get home again, and go about our daily business. And I think we all owe a big vote of thanks to a highway department operating with very few people versus past years, but still getting the job done. We've received a grant, finally, for Laurel Road. This was applied for by one of my predecessors some years ago. And finally, the federal government has come through with a grant for us to pave the portion of Laurel Road in between Lockwood and Glen Drive. In addition, there's some other good news on that front. The state has increased the allocation to our town of highway repair aid for 2013. And instead of our usual roughly 110,000, we're going to get 150,000. It isn't huge, but it helps. We have agreed to take on an intern from the Cornell School of Engineering this summer. And for a very small amount of money, they are going to bring the latest technology to bear on assessing the roads in town. And that will provide a base for us to plan, work on our roads, and move ahead. In addition, the software which they use will remain a town possession, and we'll be able to update this work year on year on year. While we're on highways, an issue has come up which has certainly entertained the press, over the last few weeks. It's called Yellow Lines on Roads in Town. Earlier this year, 2 members of my town board, Peter DeLucia and Frank Kelly, made a strong case for us putting yellow lines on the major town roads. The case was based entirely on one thing. It was based on safety, the safety of the people using the roads. They convinced me, and I am supporting them. I have read a lot about this over the last few weeks. A lot of work done by the Cornell School of Highway School, which in fact is the source of highway expertise in New York State. The fact is that the town must give a priority to people's safety that is greater than almost anything else we address. Now, this doesn't apply to every road in town, please. It applies to those roads that we call connector roads. Those are roads which lead, like Elmwood Road, the road I live on, which is in fact a key way to Connecticut via West Lane. It is used a lot by people who do not live on the road and who do not necessarily know the road well and need the maximum help, particularly in bad weather and mist, to ensure that they stay on the road. We have a growing population of older people in this town. And the truth is that older people do not see quite as well as younger people. They need help. This isn't unique to Lewisboro. Drive through Pound Ridge. Pound Ridge has yellow lines on almost every single road in town. In fact, far more than we're even considering for our town. Bedford has yellow lines on town roads, roughly at the same level as we're planning. So we're planning to put it on those roads that we call connector roads. Is it expensive? No. We believe that we can completely satisfy any need for yellow lines on our roads for under $10,000. It's the cheapest buy in personal safety that I've seen in some time. Finally, looking forward, Lewisboro Town Wellness Day is on the 18th of May in the town park. The opening of the LBA, Lewisboro Baseball Association season, is on the 20th of April. Camp sign-up is on the 27th of April. Get your pool and tennis permits. Look through the Parks and Rec program, and you'll find 1,001 ways of entertaining yourself this spring and this summer. So, thank you for listening to me. Have a great summer. We live in a magnificent town to enjoy great weather in. Thank you for watching Lewisboro Community Television, Channel 20.
You're watching Lewisboro Community Television, Channel 20.